Righty. Well, beautiful. Welcome here, Rachel, Dr. Millner. I'm so happy to have you here. I'd love for you to just give us a little bit of an introduction, what your name is and what you do.
I'm Rachel Millner. I'm a psychologist in the Philadelphia area, and I work with clients for therapy. I do a lot of supervision and consultation. I'm also a fat activist and do a lot of activism and advocacy work. And I'm also really trying hard to become a plus size Peloton instructor, but that's like my fun side activity. So, but in general, I work mostly in the therapy and activist spaces.
Okay. Beautiful. I love that. So I'd love to start there. You identify, I believe, as a psychologist, an eating disorder specialist, and a fat activist. So I'm curious how those identities hold together and what you think they bring by being together.
Yeah, it's hard for me to imagine doing the work without having those identities kind of together because when you're working with people with eating disorders, especially, but in general, just working with people, everybody lives in a body and has complicated relationship with their body, but especially for folks with eating disorders, where for many of them, like their relationship with their body is so central to the eating disorder, and to do that work in the therapy room without trying to change things in the larger culture feels really limiting to me. That
Yeah.
we can create a really safe, affirming, liberatory therapy room, but we're still sending people back into a world that is so stigmatizing and pathologizing of bodies. And so it
Yeah.
feels important to me to be both working on the larger, more macro level, and then also doing the individual therapy, which is important too.
Yeah, I love that point that you're making, and I think really kind of ties to this underlying truth or this underlying reality that is I think of mental health problems as a personal issue, like, oh, that's your problem. We don't often think people with eating disorders, yes, have maybe a personal predisposition to something, but that is existing in a context. That is getting triggered in a context that doesn't treat bodies the same and treats certain bodies particularly poorly. And so I think that piece that you're saying is you don't just heal an eating disorder in the room because it's not, you don't have all the pieces in the room. You've got the person, but there's the culture, and that needs healing too.
Exactly. I think that if diet culture didn't exist, the number of people with eating disorders would go down significantly.
Yes.
And for people who maybe would still get an eating disorder for, genetic reasons or trauma or other things, healing from
Right.
the eating disorder would become significantly easier.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So I want to kind of go into culture a little bit more, and particularly this um, pursuit that you've had with trying to get into the fitness industry. And the thing is, the fitness industry does have a very profitable relationship with people who are in larger bodies. But the way that it's presented is that fat people are the target market for transforming. They're not the face of fitness. And you're wanting to be the face of fitness. You're wanting to be a Peloton instructor, which I just think is so exciting. But I want to hear about how that contradiction is impacting people in larger bodies and people who identify as fat who really want to move.
Yeah, it's so complicated. So, like you said, fitness is really preys on fat people. So
Hmm.
targets fat people and does a lot of marketing around like trying to get fat people to be fit. There's this narrative of fat people aren't doing movement, and if we can just get them to move, then maybe they won't be fat anymore. And
Right.
so there's really this targeting of fat people, but it's all about then we'll make you not fat. So come to us because you need our help because there's something wrong with your body, and if you would just move, then you'll become not fat. And so then fitness spaces are really predatory there's not anything safe about being in a fat body when you're in a space that is trying to make your body different, and that everybody in there is trying to not look like you. And
Right.
so it's a
Right.
really unsafe environment that is not at all welcoming. And I am always like, you know, all you do is tell fat people to move and then create movement spaces that are not at all safe for fat people. So I think
Wow.
that's a really big challenge
Wow.
in general.
That's so
Um,
powerful. Yeah.
yeah, and I know for me, I have had a complicated relationship with movement throughout having struggled with an eating disorder, but
Hmm.
one of the things that just really stood out to me, especially at the start of the pandemic, which was when I first got my Peloton, was
Uh-huh.
being fat in a gym setting isn't safe for the reasons I was just saying. And then people are like, okay, we'll go outside. Anyone can put on sneakers or whatever, which
Hmm.
isn't true, but okay. But
Right.
then it's not always safe as a fat person to be walking outside when there are people who will yell out of cars and make comments.
Hmm.
And so I
Hmm.
think for a lot of fat people, being able to do movement in their own space
Yeah.
can be really helpful and
Right.
affirming. And we need to see fat people who are not just doing movement, but are leading, whether it's fitness classes or conversations about movement, and are not
Yeah.
talking about trying to get small in order to shift the conversation about movement.
Right.
Representation matters a lot. So when somebody is in a smaller body leading a fitness class, they can be very inclusive and they can say all affirming language, and that's so important, but it still is putting smaller bodies sort of at the
Yeah.
top of the hierarchy by saying,
Yeah.
here's who we want at the front of the room.
Totally. Yeah, you're so right. I mean, it really feels like that, um, connection that people have been drawing, which is fat bodies only get to be the before picture. They don't get to be the after picture. And that you're supposed to be going for an after picture, I think, is the other kind of underlying message with that. So I'm curious for you when you think about the idea of becoming a representative of fitness, a Peloton instructor, which I think of cycling as like one of the hardest things that you could do. So kind of this like in my mind, like, oh, this like incredible, face of fitness. What do you think that could do for people, for someone in a larger body or a fat body to see you? How do you think that might feel since it is such an unwelcoming space, even if people who look like me aren't trying to do that? We can say the right things and we're not saying the thing with our bodies, we're just not. So I'm curious what you think. What could that do for people?
So many people who know about my goal of becoming a Peloton instructor tell me that if there was a fat cycling instructor, they would buy a bike. And
Uh-huh.
because then they know that they're not going to hear comments about burning calories or trying to lose weight. They know that there's a lot of respect and affirmation for fat bodies if a company or organization is actually putting a fat person at the front of the
Mhm.
room. I think
Mhm.
it automatically makes the space center fat bodies, and
Mhm.
people in all size bodies would be welcome in any
Mhm.
class I taught, of course, but it's such a shift to say we're going to center fat people. Everybody's welcome, but the fat people are who's centered here, which is the opposite of what happens in pretty much
Right?
every other space.
Yeah, I love that. And it really feels like it's setting up different goals then. Like goals then get to be about something other than what your body looks like, which is always going to change. And even maybe to some degree what it can do, which will change throughout our life cycles too. But it's setting up different goals. And I want to hear a little bit more about what those goals look like. So many people coming into movement spaces, really in all kinds of bodies, um, have been taught this kind of cultural experience with exercise that it's punishment or it's a compensation, it's a price you pay for eating, or you have to make up for stuff, kind of all of this messaging. And I'm curious, this concept you're talking about of building a space with different goals. I can imagine joy in movement being one of those. Tell me a little bit more about what goals start to look like if you're associating exercise with being for something else, not to change what your body looks like.
Yeah, it's such a shift in how we think about movement and such
Yeah.
an important question. And I always, this like phrase of joyful movement is a tough one for me because we want movement to be joyful in the sense of doing things that in general you like to do. But I
Yeah.
don't think movement itself always feels joyful.
Oh,
And
Rachel, it
I
is so
think,
healing to hear you just say that. I'm one of those people that doesn't actually like exercise very much. So hearing someone
good.
who, you know, who likes, I think, to exercise like you, I'm like, oh, it doesn't. It doesn't always feel good. Even
Yeah.
things I like.
Right. And some of like healing your relationship with movement is learning to discern when are the times that it doesn't feel joyful and you decide to keep going because there's
Yeah.
other reasons that you're doing it, and
Hmm.
times where it doesn't feel joyful and it's like, you know what, I'm not doing this today. And you end the movement or you don't start or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of goals, I think a lot of people, when they talk to me about movement, they've started doing movement again because they have some sort of long-term like fitness goal. They want to be able to hike somewhere. They want to
Hmm.
go on a bike trip and be able to complete that, and it's something they're building towards.
Yeah.
For me personally, I hate all that stuff. Like, I do not want to hike. I don't want to bike outside. Like, that would not work for me as a goal, but I know that is a really common one for a lot of
Uh-huh.
people.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think for a lot of folks, cardiovascular fitness,
Yeah.
totally separate from anything
Hmm.
related to body size.
Totally.
Movement is helpful for, I think for me, it really helps my mood a lot.
Yes.
Um, I think there's something powerful in the like being hot and sweaty and like feeling more present in your body.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think it's an
Absolutely.
outlet for folks. I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah. And it really, the way that you're describing that brings up, 100 other questions for me. But it feels like what happens then when you say we can have goals for movement that aren't changing how our body looks. That actually doesn't shut down the conversation, but it opens up this question about what do you get out of movement? Because you're right. You just said some people do it because they want to go on these outdoor adventures. Absolutely the heck not for you. That is not the goal. But you talked about mental health. You talked about getting that clarity in your mind when you have to be in the zone because it's so hard. And there are just so many things that people can get out of it. So I think rather than shutting down the conversation, it just opens up a much more interesting one.
yeah, that is so true, and one that we are so not used to having in our culture. It's like so boring that movement conversations are so focused on how many calories did you burn or what you're trying to lose weight. Like, that's so limiting in
Yeah.
what movement is really about.
Yeah. That's so true. One of the things that I think I come up upon sort of in my clinical work, and I imagine you do too, but I'm curious, is that you said something earlier about that ability to just kind of be in your body. Um, and it's so wonderful to get out of the mind sometimes, but being in the body is very difficult for a lot of people. And that can come but that can come from the culture that we live in that traumatizes bodies. And that can also come from, capital T trauma. And I'm curious what you see in terms of the relationship between trauma and eating disorders. Like, what does trauma do that increases eating disorders risk or maintains that risk?
Hmm. I mean, that's a big question and one we probably could spend, several hours
Days.
on. But I think there's a few things that come to mind to me right away. I think trauma interrupts our relationship with our body and interrupts our nervous system. So
Hmm.
the way that kind of when we think about how do we approach the world, or what happens when we're in a stressful situation, or someone even like gets startled, let's say. For
Yeah.
somebody without trauma, the way that their nervous system responds to those situations is going to be really different than somebody who's experienced trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And so the experience of being in your body shifts when your body hasn't been a safe place to be, whether it's,
Right.
you know, big T trauma or other traumas
Right.
or dealing with weight stigma.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about eating, that's obviously something where ideally we're able to be in our body, and
Mm-hmm.
when that gets disrupted, then it becomes way more complicated, and eating disorders are often triggered by that. I think separate from the relationship with food itself, that when we are dealing with trauma and we're more dissociated, it's hard to even have a sense of yourself and a
Right.
sense of taking up space in the world. And so there can be this desire to either get as small as possible or be just so disconnected from being a human in the world that there's not really awareness of needs, desires, wants. And so your body's sort of existing in space, but there's not the like connection of how do I care for this body, because
Right.
you're not even in it.
Right. Right. And that disconnection is, one of the things I often talk about, and I'm curious if you do too, is that that disconnection comes from a place that is also trying to help you. I think having an eating disorder is so frustrating. Initially it's often kind of egocentric. We think it's doing something good for us. But in treatment, it's frustrating. It's frustrating to think that way. It's frustrating to not be able to just get better. And one of the things that I often come back to, I can feel kind of like a broken record saying it, but is, you know, this is something that you developed at a time when you needed it to try to be okay, just to get through it. And that disconnection isn't your body doing something wrong or your mind having done something wrong. It's something you needed at a time. We're helping you come into a different time of life, but it's not bad or it's not wrong to have
Yeah,
had that
I'd say
happen.
something very similar. A lot of like coping is rooted in wisdom, and your eating disorder has been really important. It's been wise coping. And I'll often say to people how nuanced it is to think about this eating disorder that for many people saved their lives and now
Mhm.
put their lives at risk. And so we're kind of holding both, like
Right.
appreciation for this way of coping that saved
Mhm.
you, and now an awareness that this way of coping is actually putting your life in danger, and maybe there are other ways to cope as you're healing and don't need the eating disorder in the same way.
Yeah, I love that. So, when we talk about trauma specifically, one of the things that I noticed that you specialize in is dissociative conditions. And dissociation is something that has a clinical, we call that a certain thing clinically. And then there's a cultural expectation kind of around dissociation. And there's overlap there, but they're not necessarily the same. When you think about your clinical work, when you see dissociation from trauma coming up in the context of eating or movement or these recovery things that we're trying to do to regain connection with the body, how does that look?
Um, so it depends. It depends a
Mhm.
lot on the person, what their trauma has been, what their dissociation looks like.
Yeah.
And I think about dissociation sort of if you think about the type of dissociation, people often use the example of like driving somewhere, you get somewhere and you're like, I don't know how I got there.
Right, right,
That's dissociation, but
right,
dissociation is on a spectrum to like somebody who has dissociative identity disorder, or DID, where their dissociation, they've actually split into separate parts. And
right.
so a part can be present and other parts are not aware of what's happening. They may lose
Mhm.
time. So the way you would work with somebody who dissociates and has DID is really
Hmm.
different than somebody who dissociates in a different way and doesn't have separate parts.
Right. Right.
And the goals change in some ways, but I think what is probably most consistent is trying to see, are there ways that we can help, whether it's a part or an alter or a part in the sense of like IFS parts, like not a separate person,
Yeah.
but like
Right. We
a
just all
part
have
of
different.
self
Yeah. Yeah.
to show up and help with whether it's eating or resting or
Hmm.
any kind of caring that needs to happen. Um,
Yeah.
if the body isn't safe yet, like if we're still building towards safety, but somebody still obviously needs to be eating, then we are talking strategies for how can
Mm.
you eat when you're not able to be present in your body. And that's often a lot of work that we do because being able to be present in your body for some people is not ever going to happen. For some
Yeah.
people, it will, and it's going to take a long time. And we still have to help people to eat consistently in the meantime.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And it really, it's interesting. I have a lot of toddlers in my life, a lot of family members have little kids. And to some degree, I think there's a type of compassion that doesn't look nice, but it is very kind. And it is the way that we take care of the parts of us that are just kind of like, I don't want to, I don't want to, just overwhelmed. Like you see kids who are just starting to have big emotions,
Mhm.
it is so overwhelming. And there's still this relationship of, and let me take care of you.
Yeah.
We're still going to put on the sunscreen, even though you hate the feel on your skin, and you're having a meltdown. We're
Yeah.
still going to have the snack, we're still going to do, right, whatever the thing is. Um, and that sometimes taking care of ourselves doesn't look like sinking into a bubble bath and really feeling it and having a sensory experience. And that's not always what self care looks like. Sometimes it looks like eat the food on your plate, because you know that that's the thing you need to do. Like put on the sunscreen, you're going to be in the sun, eat the food on your plate. You need to nourish your body. Is that kind of right? Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's where like the entire concept of self-care becomes problematic,
Yeah.
sort of similar to what we were saying in the beginning that like these are not individual issues and so they're not fixed by individual like self-care.
Yeah.
There's nothing
Right.
wrong with self-care. It can be great. I'm not saying don't do it, but it's not the fix that I think our culture often makes it out to be. Like taking a bubble bath can feel really good, but it's not going to like heal oppression. And so
Yeah.
I think it's true.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes we just need to like what do we need to do to get through the day?
Hmm.
And that's going to include eating. And
Yeah.
so
I
how do
love that.
we create an environment where that can happen even when we don't want to and
Hmm.
we're not embodied and it's like I just have to check this off my list.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So I'm curious then, and I think the ceiling, is going to be different for different people. Kind of like the goalpost is different for different people, but in a general kind of sense, what would you say it does mean to trust your body or begin to trust your body when your body has been the site of trauma or an illness or an eating disorder? Like when the body itself, its cues have felt unsafe or
Yeah, it's a good question and so complicated, like you said, different for different people.
right.
I think the way that I've come to think about it over time is about relationship with the body.
Okay.
And the same way when we have a relationship with other people, the relationships evolve. There's moments we feel more connected to people, moments we feel less connected,
Mhm.
moments where they may break our trust and then we have to rebuild it again.
Yeah.
And I've started thinking about it similarly with the relationship we have with our body. It's like, here we are, coexist, or we are one,
Yeah.
depending. Some people,
Right.
I think, don't like the like idea of like in a body. It's like we are one. Or for a lot
Mhm.
of people, it's helpful to think about like living in a body, like in a more
Uh-huh.
separate way. But I think our relationship's always evolving. So
Yeah.
sometimes there is trust, sometimes there's not. Sometimes we can trust one thing but not another. So
Hmm.
like sometimes it's like I trust that I'm going to wake up each day, but I don't trust that my body is going to be able to do the things I want it to do
Hmm.
because it's let me down, or I've had to do a lot of grieving because it's not able to do those things.
Right. Right.
Um, and so, like, how does trust look in a relationship where there's going to be a lot of grief? How does
Yeah.
a relationship where some days you feel connected and some days you don't? Is there a way to still show up with compassion even if you're mad at your body or it's not a safe place to be, thinking about like, wow, my body's been through so much?
Yeah.
I think it helps, especially if one of the reasons that your body hasn't felt safe is because of weight stigma, to really work on externalizing that. That, like, it's
Hmm.
not really been that your body isn't safe, it's that the world hasn't been safe. And,
Yeah.
like, trying to separate that out in order to build
Hmm.
more safety in your body. Because if you go out into the world as a fat person, there's always going to be a chance that you encounter weight stigma.
Yeah.
And weight stigma doesn't feel safe, but that doesn't mean that you can't still feel safe inside of your own body.
Uh-huh.
Like trusting that you're not going to shame yourself, trusting
Right.
that you're going to be able to hold that you still have value and worth,
Hmm.
even in a
Hmm.
culture that wants to tell you that your body's wrong.
Yeah. And what you're saying, I think with that piece around going out into the world, it reminds me, and I'm not sure if this is what you were intending, but it reminds me a little bit of how we talk about what boundaries really are. Boundaries aren't rules that I set on other people's behavior because we can't do that for the most part. Boundaries are what I am going to do in certain situations. And it sounds like that's a little bit of kind of what you're saying. I don't necessarily trust that the world's going to treat me the way I want it to or the way that it should, but I can trust that I will navigate situations in a way, to keep myself safe. Or is that kind of what you're meaning with that?
Yeah, I think exactly. I think sometimes it's in terms of action and sometimes it's more in terms of like internal
Mm-hmm.
emotion or relationship. But I think I have a lot of clients, and I've done this myself, where let's say with family members who make
Mm-hmm.
comments, or that being able to say, if you say things that are fat phobic, I'm going to leave, and
Uh-huh.
then
Here's
trusting
how
yourself
I'm
that
gonna
you will
respond.
follow through with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because like you said, we can ask somebody to not say things that are fat phobic, but we can't control whether they do or not. But we can then make decisions about what do we do in response.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I'm curious for you when you think about y- other people in this space doing this work. There is so much thin privilege, white privilege, able bodied privilege. There's a spectrum, but I'm curious when you think about maybe specifically thin, able bodied people doing this work. What would you want them to understand? What would you want us to understand about the limits of our experience and our authority in a space where we are really not intended to be centered?
Yeah, I feel strongly that we need everybody. That we need people within privilege, partially because there's ways that somebody with thin privilege is going to be listened to that somebody who's fat may not be, or
Hmm.
there's times that there's advocacy that a thin person can do that won't be harmful to them, but a fat person doing it would be harmful.
Yeah,
But also, weight stigma infects everybody. It impacts fat people more, but it still impacts thin people. Like if we
yes,
talk to people who are in smaller bodies and ask them about a fear of weight gain, that's weight stigma that has impacted
yeah,
them. And
right.
so we need everybody in this movement. I think where it becomes a problem is when thin people are centering themselves in the
Yes.
movement and become sort of who is most visible in the
Mm-hmm.
movement. And so I think that piece is where it's important to make sure that fat people are being centered, people are being heard from, and stories are being told. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think one way is what you're doing, right? Like you're creating this platform and you're making sure that fat voices are heard. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's one of the ways I think then people can really make an
Mm-hmm.
impact in the movement is just considering those things. I
Yeah.
also, and this is really personal to me, so I think if you have friends or you work with people who are fat, it depends on what they prefer. But
Yes.
I really appreciate when the thin people in my life understand some of what makes like navigating the world in a fat body hard and do some of
Uh-huh.
that like advocacy for me. Like I really appreciate when I know that if we're going to a restaurant that a friend suggested that they've already made sure that the tables and the chairs are going to work for my body and like that I just know I don't have to do that. So I know for some people that may not feel as comfortable, but I think we can ask people what feels most supportive.
That is such a cool example that you're giving. I remember even just recently when I was putting images on the new Body Culture Revolution website, there's a section that's talking about other providers, and I wanted an image of kind of like chairs in a circle or something like that. And all the images were these teeny little folding chairs or chairs with arms or
Mm-hmm.
all of these things where I was like, I can't. Is it a good image? Yeah. Is it appropriate in any way for what this is? No. Most of the
Yeah.
people I'm going to want to work with are going to look at that chair and go, "You're not thinking about me." You don't. You're just not thinking it through. Maybe not intending anything
Mm-hmm.
negative, but not thinking about it. I'm curious if you have any times in your life, just memories that you cherish, or where you just really felt that somebody in your life made you feel really seen because they did do a scope of the restaurant, or they did, I don't know what it might have been, but do you have any memories like that where you just kind of go back and think that was really good, somebody in a smaller body really did it right?
Mm-hmm. So my best friend is somebody I've known since high school. So we've known each
Okay.
other for a very long time now.
Yes.
Um, and so she's also been with me through my eating disorder and throughout all of it.
Hmm.
And we spend a lot of time together. And one of the things we really love to do is go to shows. We're lucky to live in Philly, which means we can easily get to New York and see shows
Uh-huh.
on Broadway. We
Oh,
like to go
that's
to
amazing.
concerts together.
Hmm.
And I know if she's the one getting the tickets, she's already either made sure to get accessible seating or will get
Hmm.
an aisle because she knows that like gives me more space. I
Yeah.
don't have to ask. I just know that
Hmm.
she wouldn't buy the tickets without either one of those things. And so
Yeah.
I love going with her because I already know she's going to do it. I don't have to ask. I
Hmm.
don't have to worry. It's just
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
And it seems like a simple thing, but it's a huge thing. It makes
Huge.
the whole experience different. I don't have any
Hmm.
anxiety about it. I can just know I'm going to go and have a good time.
Ugh, I love that so much. I mean, it really feels like, I mean, obviously, you have this bond of trust and love that's built on a lot of things, but that just act of doing the mental and emotional labor.
Mhm.
There's so much love in that. I think especially maybe for women, but not just for women, but there is kind of this additional love language around, I'm going to do the mental and emotional labor because of how much I love and care about and respect you. And
Yeah.
it sounds like that's a wonderful friendship for that.
Yeah. Yep. And it doesn't, I mean, like you said, this is 30 years of trust built,
Right.
but another quick example, I recently took one of my kids to Disney World with his best
Oof.
friend and his best friend's mom.
Oh
And
boy.
I mean, I'm friends with his best friend's mom, but it's not like we have a long history of friendship.
Right.
But she does follow me on Instagram, so she knows about like fat activism and things.
Uh-huh.
And most of the rides at Disney are pretty accessible, but there's
Okay.
one newer one in Magic Kingdom called Tron, and the seats are not fat friendly, but they do have a back row where the seats are shaped differently that make them fat friendly. And so
Okay.
we were going to go on the ride, and I was like, I need to make sure that we wait for one of the like cars that goes by and has that back row.
Yeah.
And when we got to like the front of the line, you just have to tell the person that you're going to wait. And it was actually her son who was like, "We got to wait for the one with the different seats." And he didn't, it's not like
What?
he knew he was doing fat activism. He doesn't have a clue.
Yeah.
But he heard what I
Right.
said. He knew it's what I needed, and he just put it out there. And it was, the
Oh
guy's
my
like, okay,
gosh.
and like had us wait for that. And it was just like no big deal. And
What a freaking delight.
yeah,
Oh my
it's
gosh,
such
that's
like
amazing.
you don't have to like have a deep understanding in order to hear somebody say this is what I need in terms of seating and then to just be the one to say it. He's like,
Yes.
you know, he was just like whatever. For me, I would have said it, but it had
Sure.
meant there was no emotional impact on him to be the one to say
Right.
it.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. And I think it really it's so meaningful. It's like the kind of story that makes you want to tear up because I think it just also it's not children are already inundated by messaging. You know, they're already in the culture. But they've had less time. You know, they're smaller.
Mhm.
And it really speaks to, I think, how natural it is to just be respectful
Mhm.
when you're not so exposed to negativity that we should judge, that we should criticize, that we should discriminate against, whatever it is, bodies that look like this, how natural it is to just accept body diversity when you're a kid because why wouldn't you? You accept, you know, this is your friend. You make sure that your friend is comfortable. It's so
Exactly.
normal. It's so human to do that. And it's such a
Yeah,
great
exactly.
example of what we could be, you know, what we
Mhm.
could do.
Right. Yeah, exactly. My son was like, "Mom, I'll sit with you." And he's like, "I don't care what seat I'm in." And that was also so sweet. Like, he's like, "What do
So
I care what
beautiful.
seat I'm in?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Are you sure? Because they are different." And he's like, "Yeah, I want to ride next to you." And it's like those things where, like, he still got to experience the ride. We got to
Mhm.
be next to each other, which was good because it's a fast, scary roller coaster. And
Uh-huh.
you know, it was like no big deal. But
Oh my
it was
gosh.
really
It
nice.
and at the same time, such a huge deal. I mean, those both sound also to me just like parenting wins. Like, that's a nice moment. Hold on to that time while he wants to be seen with you, just
Yeah.
as a mother child, like at all. You know,
Yes.
that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it was very sweet.
That is really cool. So I want to come back just a little bit to one of our questions on movement, just because I was thinking one of the things that I encounter a lot is women who are feeling just defeated. You know, they've tried movement, they've tried diets, they've tried making peace with their bodies, they've tried hate, you know, that just feel so defeated. I'm curious what you would or what you do say to people who are in larger bodies who maybe just feel like they've given up on movement entirely. Like they can't imagine any kind of fitness that's for them.
Yeah. I think the first thing I make sure to say is it's okay to not do movement. Like,
Yes.
there is no moral obligation to do movement.
Mhm.
You don't need to do movement. It is fine
Mhm.
not to. And
Yeah.
really wanting people to, like, fully have that permission because the culture has said you have to do movement and that's been
Yeah.
internalized. And I think the in order to heal your relationship with movement, you have to have permission not to. And
Yeah.
so, if you don't have a no, then your yes isn't very meaningful. And
Yes.
so, I
Beautiful.
think that's the place to start is like,
Mhm.
you don't have to do movement. And if you've been trying to force yourself into movement, can we pause that? and
Yeah.
like take a break and let's like kind of talk about your relationship with movement, process what you've learned about it, what are your
Mhm.
experiences with movement, and then we can come around to a conversation of, is movement something you want to do? And
Right.
what do you envision that being like? And
Mhm.
then, like you said earlier, it becomes like such a broader conversation. So much opens up
Yeah.
when the
Yeah.
conversation is about that versus, these like two things that we've been taught that it's supposed to be about. And I get creative with people if people still want to do movement after we've, had all this time to explore, they've taken time away, they have permission to say no. Then we start to challenge our ideas about what movement is,
Mhm.
because I think a lot of us have learned movement is either like you're in a gym or like you're running or like something,
Mhm.
these very small
Right.
examples of movement. And we start to think in like a much broader terms of like, is it dancing, is it hula hooping,
Yes.
do you like to swim, like what are other things that are movement that maybe you really actually do like to do but haven't
Mhm.
even considered as movement because of the way that you've been sort of indoctrinated into this like idea of movement or exercise.
Yeah.
And then we start to experiment, like what is it like for to do it for 2 minutes, how does it
Yes.
feel, and
Mhm.
thinking about like, do you need to be someplace by yourself, is there a certain environment, is there a friend you want to do movement with, and
Mhm.
starting to like, we're just doing gentle experiments. We can try it and say no to it, we can try it and say yes to it. It may be the right kind of movement, it may be the wrong kind of movement, it may be the right kind of movement now and the wrong kind next month. Like, so
Yes.
we're just doing that like real experimenting to see
Mhm.
what works for that particular person and their body.
Yeah. I love that so much, and I think you're right to have kinda, um, led with, you can say no, and indeed, no is necessary for yes to
Mm.
be safe. I
Yeah.
have to be able to fully be in a no
Hmm.
to get to a yes that's okay. And I think about that with eating disorders a lot because there's all of this messaging like, you need to move, movement's good for you, all of these kinds of things. But in eating disorders, oftentimes to get out of the cycle of compulsion does take a break. It does require that often. And it is so psychologically demanding to take that break sometimes.
Hmm.
Um, but it is the thing that allows the safety for the actual curiosity to happen, to start being interested in things. And I think, to your point, sometimes it's surprising what we are curious about. I've been tickled by how many women say, well, if I'm not moving to try to be smaller, what I kind of want to do is pick up heavy things and put them down.
Hmm.
If I'm not trying to
Yeah.
make my body smaller, it'd be pretty cool to be strong, and that starts to become an option,
Hmm.
if you don't have to get small. Can you get strong? Can you get whatever? It opens up more.
It does, it really does open up a lot more.
Yeah. So these are some questions I didn't tell you about. It's just kind of a bonus. I got curious this morning when I was thinking about talking to
Okay.
you. Um, I'm wondering if you have right now, when you're on your Peloton doing a class or doing your thing or envisioning having your own class, is there a particular playlist vibe or a song or an artist that right now is kind of like, that's the vibe. That's the thing that makes me feel like I can stop thinking about everything and just move and fly and be in the moment. Do you have anything like that right now?
Well, that's such a good question. So when I ride my Peloton, I pick what class I want to do based on the instructor and the like music theme
Oh,
usually.
wow.
And was it last? I guess it was last weekend. I think I took a Broadway Pride ride,
Oh my
and
gosh.
so like I'm always like into Broadway. So
That is
if I'm like
delightful.
creating my own playlist, I Broadway is like a theme I go to very often.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
so cool.
yeah, there's a Brandy Carlisle ride for
Uh,
Pride, and that was great too. So that's where my mind is going right away.
yes. Yeah.
But yeah, the music, it makes such a difference
Such a
when you're
difference.
doing, I
Yeah.
think, movement in general, but for me especially with the Peloton.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think our music is one of those things for me anyway that I find helpful with getting kind of like the mental chatter, you know,
Yeah.
because I want my mood to be different. And
Mhm.
Broadway, I have not even thought of that, but now I'm so inspired. I think could be an incredible like Six, the musical would be incredible. I mean, there's so much. There's so much now. You're like mind blasting me. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's great. It's so much fun.
That
Um,
sounds really
yeah.
empowering. That's awesome.
Mhm.
So I've got another question for you. I earlier said that one of my like it's a therapy cliche, but I say it all the time because I just think it's true, which is like this thing that we're fighting to heal you did heal you once. You
Mhm.
know, like you're not doing anything to hurt yourself. Everything, even when it feels like we're fighting against it, is something that was once helpful for you. And it all deserves respect. And I say that to a point where people that work with me are like, eye roll. They know it's coming. um, do you have any particular therapy cliches that you hate saying because you know it's a therapy cliche, but you keep saying it because it is true or it keeps feeling right?
Mm, I often say it's not your fault. That's probably one I
Uh-huh.
say very, very, very frequently.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if I'm sure you do. A lot of my clients will often apologize, like for all kinds of things, and
Right.
I'm
Existing.
often saying like, there's no apologies in therapy. Like, you don't need to
Yeah.
apologize here. I would say it's all welcome here.
Yeah.
Um, what else do I say a lot to people? I think in a lot of different ways, I say something along the lines of how what we've been taught about bodies isn't true. I think
Uh-huh.
the language I use for that changes because it really depends on where somebody is in their process.
Right.
But I am pointing out or planting seeds that what
Yeah.
we've been taught about bodies and body size has all been a lie.
I love that. Okay. So along a similar line, if you could get that therapist magic wand that we've all been wanting,
Yes.
and you could use it to get people to really know something, like really know one really important thing, what would you want to just be able to kind of like magically help people just know?
Oh, wow. Okay, so there's a lot of things. It's very hard to think of just one. So I'm going to think of just one in the context of this conversation
Yeah.
and know that there are many other answers I could also give. But in the
Mm-hmm.
context of our conversation, I
Yeah.
think what I would like people to know is that the thing that they're afraid of, whether they're afraid of becoming or they're afraid of staying, so like people who are afraid of becoming fat or
Mm-hmm.
afraid of staying fat, like the thing that they're so scared of is really not anything to be afraid of. Their ideas of
Mm-hmm.
how terrible it is are not true. Like
Uh-huh.
many, like myself and many, many fat people are living really wonderful, full lives.
Right.
And so this belief that people have that, fatness is going to be the worst thing that could happen, or if they can't lose weight, it's the worst thing. I wish I had the magic wand for people to know that that's just not true.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And I love how direct that is. It ties, I was expecting you to say maybe something like, oh, that they're loved or worthy or whatever,
I
which
would
is
love all
true
that
for
too.
what you're saying. Um, but what you're describing, I think, is so much more specific and so important and so directly at the root of what is happening, I think, for so many people, right? We wouldn't control something or try to control something so much if we weren't terrified. And if that terror wasn't gone or was gone, what could open up easier, maybe, if that
Yeah.
wasn't there. That's really cool. Okay,
Now
I've
I'm
got one last question.
imagining
Oh, go
like,
ahead.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I'm imagining now like a whole group of like liberatory therapists, all with our own magic wands, and how amazing the world would be if we could each have our one
We,
wish.
we each get our own little thing. I know. Yeah, it would be a really colorful, I think, situation.
Yeah.
It would be pretty fun. Okay, last question for you. And this I think also is maybe one of the tough ones. It's very tough for me. What is one of the favorite foods that quitting diet culture gave back to you? Is one of your favorite ones where when you have it, you go, I'm so grateful to be out of that, to be able to just enjoy that.
Such a good question. Um, Another one I could come up with a lot of answers, but I
Yeah.
will answer in the context of summer. Um,
Uh,
we have a food, I think it's like pretty regional,
okay.
but it's called water ice.
Yes.
And okay,
Well,
it's
I'm also from the East. I'm from about an hour from where you live. So,
okay.
so
So,
that might be why I'm like, yeah, of course.
okay, so
But
for
tell us
people,
about it because I think you're right. It is regional. We don't have that here.
yeah, so for people who are like, it's water ice, it's not just water and ice, or like a lot of people think of snow cones where it's like the mix
Mhm.
of ice with like the flavoring.
Uh-huh.
That's not what I'm talking about. Water ice here can be like, I was at the water ice place near us over the weekend and I got half peanut butter cup and half brownie dough. So it's like made, it's it's not as thick as like ice cream or soft serve ice cream. It's because I think the like ratio of like the actual ice is higher, so it's not as
And the ice is
thick.
so much small. It's
It's
like,
smaller. Yeah, you can't
yeah.
even taste the individual ice pieces. Like it's not crunchy or anything.
Right. I wanted to
Uh,
say it's like sand, but like the smoothest, most delicious sand that also still melts on your tongue.
it's really good. And then this place like mixes whatever other flavoring. So like the one had peanut butter cups like all mixed in and it's actually like the water ice itself is chocolate. The other had chocolate water ice with brownie pieces and white
Ah,
chocolate chips mixed in it. It's so good. And I
so
said summer because
delightful.
it's only open here like end of spring to very beginning of fall. So it's very seasonal and regional
Yes.
and it is so good and I'm so glad that I eat it whenever I want it now.
That is a delight. That's so funny that you say that because when I last visited Maryland, which was just a couple of weeks ago, that is what I required that we get.
Oh, that's so
That
funny.
I was visiting, and I ate it maybe 3 times in 10 days or something. Not as much as I wanted, but
Yeah,
it was pretty good. Pretty nice to
so
have
good.
that. Yeah, I have a very similar thing. My year-round one though is cake. I just
Oh yeah.
I love the like moist texture. It's not as much of a summer thing. But cakes and cupcakes and muffins, all of the wonderful like baked goods, because I just didn't eat them for so long. And I'm like, oh, my life that I get to do this. What a blessing. Okay, Rachel. Well, I want to thank you so much for having this conversation. I'm going to finish up the recording now, but thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.